thank you, and again, welcome to Washington, D.C. I hope your trip has been enjoyable and busy. As you know, you're here on the day that my old committee is dealing with the Farm Bill, and I'm hoping that we get it on the floor this time. So anybody that knows Speaker Boehner, tell him to put it on the floor and just give us a shot, so we can get both Democrats and Republicans together. So we can go ahead and get it done. As you know, you saw what happened last time. The Senate passed it over. We passed it from the House committee, but it never got to the floor. So we're hoping that this time we get it on the floor and then get it in the conference committee so we can go ahead and get it done. The last time we passed this, if you recall, I believe President Bush was the president, and I think we overrode his veto twice, I believe. To get the bill done. So the Farm Bill is important to my area down there in Texas, and I know it's important to your industry also, and we got to get it done. No, let's not pass it on. Let's go ahead and get it done as soon as we can. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about appropriations. As you know, my committees, when I first got here from the very beginning, I was in the Agriculture Committee. I was there 8 years, and miss my folks here in the Agriculture Committee and Homeland Security. Now I'm in a new committee, Appropriations, and I want to talk to you a little bit about appropriations and give you a little history, a little bit about appropriations, and then make sure that I'll leave it open for a few easy questions that you might have for me. Any hard questions? Who's your next speaker? We'll leave it for the next speaker. First of all, look, when we deal with the budget or with the appropriations, it's very simple. We got about a $3.7 trillion budget. The income coming in is about 2.7, and that's where the deficit is at. In fact, this year I was just noticing that deficit will probably be getting smaller, and it'll be probably by the end of the year, by the time we get to the end of the year, probably the smallest we've had since 2007. So the deficit is getting smaller, but of course the debt has been adding for many years under both Democrats and Republicans. In fact, if you look at the history, I think there's still some money we owe from the American Revolution and War. I don't know what we still have that there, but it's been there for a while. So it's been one of those that both Democrats and Republicans have added to the debt. So the debt is the accumulation. The deficit is the difference between what we spend in a year and what we bring in. Now, I'm a former business person, and you as business individuals, you also know that the first thing you do as a business is you look at the expenditures and you look how much income, either you raise the income or you lower the expenses, one or the other, or a combination of both. A lot of business people would say, well, just go ahead and bring down the expenditure down from the 3.7 to the $2.7 trillion. If we did that, my job will be very easy become very easy as a congressman, because I could talk to you about the Farm Bill because there will be no money for the Farm Bill. Could talk to you about transportation. Could talk to you about the military. Could talk to you about Homeland Security. Could talk to you about a lot of things, because the only income that will come in will cover pretty much the entitlements. That's it, the entitlements. In fact, the entitlements make 2/3 of the whole federal budget. 2/3 of the whole federal budget, and becoming bigger and getting bigger and getting bigger. So therefore, when we talk about the 3.7, 2.7, we have to understand that it's a little bit more complicated. It can be done, and I know we can if we do this in a bipartisan way, but if we're going to reduce that deficit, which it is going down itself, we got to figure out, do we keep building that deficit? Do we look for additional revenues? Do we cut more? And keep in mind, discretionary funding now is being brought down to almost the 2007 level when President Bush was there. So the discretionary funding level has been spent. But the problem that we get up there, I'm usually talking in district, but we get up here in Washington, D.C. is that we face a question that's brought up in the district. And I'm sure some of y'all probably have said this also. Mr. Congressman, or Madam Congressman, don't raise our taxes, number one. Number two, get rid of that deficit that it's getting out of hand. And number three, by the way, don't touch my farm program, because my farm program is the most important program in the whole world. And that's what we got to look at. And I hear that from educators, I hear that from police, I hear that from the military, and we hear that from everybody. But it's one of those things that we got to keep in mind that 3.7, 2.7, and that's what we got to deal with. The other thing you will hear soon, very soon, is the debt ceiling. The debt ceiling, if I can explain this, because some people will go on and say, well, don't raise the debt ceiling and that will take care of spending. Let me put it this way. Let me give you the analogy of what the debt ceiling is. You know, who has a credit card here? Right? Well, I think everybody has a credit. When you get your credit card and you cut it or you don't pay it, would that reduce your spending? No, right? Because where is the spending at? It's what you spend and use your credit card, and the debt ceiling, which is the accumulation of the debt itself, is really the spending that was done over here. So there are some folks that were here, and you probably were here, well, just don't raise the debt ceiling, that will take care of the spending. It's like getting your credit card and saying, you know what, I got this credit card, I'm gonna pay this, or I'm not gonna pay this, I'm gonna pay this, or I'm just gonna tear up the credit card bill, invoice, and that will take care of my expenses. It's not. So I say this because sometimes we hear a lot of things up here in Washington, which is again, what I call not reality in mainstream America, and we got to address this in a real way. And I say this because I feel very confident that we can address budget issues. I feel very confident that we can address appropriation issues. I feel very confident that we can address a lot of this if we just sit down, both in a bipartisan way and address some of those issues. The appropriation process where I'm at is very, very interesting because in your business you probably have one budget, right? One bill. You should have one appropriation. Well, over here it's so big, the $3.7 trillion, that we break it down into different categories. Where the ag industry is at, it's a different area from where the military is at, or the foreign assistance that we provide other countries. And by the way, foreign assistance makes up 1% of the whole federal budget. Because most of the time people will say, well, get rid of that foreign aid and reduce our deficit. But foreign aid provides only 1%, and I know that your folks here work with USAID, right? USAID, and you provide assistance. But remember, USAID or the assistance that we provide is only 1% of the whole federal budget. In fact, the ag budget is less than a half of a 1%. And this is why I'm saying that if we want to address the budget, you don't look at the ag area where it's half of a 1% or the small ticket items. You got to look at the big ticket items. And remember what I started off with. What's the big ticket items? The entitlements. They're 2/3 of the whole federal budget. Now, I know that there are some folks who would say, well, let's not touch the entitlements or let's not touch the military. Where if you take out the military spending and not touch that, you take out the entitlements because you don't want to touch that, then that only leaves what we call discretionary funding, non-military discretionary funding, which is about 15 to 17% of the $3.7 trillion. Now you tell me, are you going to balance a budget on the 15, 17%, which is a discretionary non-military funding? You're not. You got to look at the whole picture, and I'm one of those that I think you got to look at all of the spending. I know the entitlements are politically sensitive, but if we're going to get to the root of how we spend money and how we have a balanced budget and how we do that, we got to look at everything. I'm one of those that I think everybody should have a little skin in the game and address that instead of saying, oh, accept me, don't touch this, don't touch this. I think we should have a little skin in the game, but still, nevertheless, still have certain priorities on how we spend the money. Because how we spend the money in any budget is a priority. I mean, if you look at your own budget, whether at your business or at home, what do? You set a priority. And you're saying, these are my expenses at home, this are my income coming in. Either we get a second job, come up with extra revenues, or saying, no, we're going to just have one job. One of the spouses is going to stay at home, take care of the kids, the other one's going to be working. So you make a decision not to bring extra income, then you got to look at the expenditures. And on the expenditures, you look at priorities. If you're paying your mortgage, That's a very important part of your priorities. You've got to pay that. Maybe entertainment expenses, you can lower that down. You can lower certain things down. And that's how budgets should be set up. And that's the way Washington should also work itself up here. It's interesting, when I was in the state legislature in Texas, I was 10 out of my 14 years, I was in the appropriations. I just started out in the appropriations. And one of the things I learned over there is that out of the 5,000 bills that are introduced, the 1,000 bills that do pass, the most important bill that's filed over there is the appropriation bill. And everything else is poetry. Here, it's the reverse in Washington. They deal with everything else, and then the main thing is the appropriation bill. And the appropriation bill, let's say the House passes one version, remember there's different bills, the Senate passes another one, then you put it together, what we call a conference committee, where you get the senators and the House members, Democrats and Republicans together, and you work it out, and you come out with a difference. And the unfortunate thing is we haven't had a conference committee between the House and the Senate since when? 2007. And that shows you the dysfunction that we have up here in Washington, where both Democrats and Republicans just can't sit down. And it's interesting, both from the Democratic and the Republican side. Everybody talks about bipartisan, right? But when somebody decides to take one step, you know what happens? Let's talk about Republicans, then we'll talk about Democrats. Then that person will be primaried. You know what I mean? They say, you know what, you're not conservative enough, we're going to go after you in the primary. And then a Democrat does that, and then what? Oh, you're not liberal enough, so we're going to go ahead and primary you. And then what happens? You start getting people that are too extreme right, too extreme left, and it's hard to get people together to work in a bipartisan way. So I say this because the appropriation bill, the farm bill, but then the money that we get in the appropriations to fund what we come up with, a farm bill, is very important. But the nature of what we do here entitles consensus building. And I encourage your congressman and you to talk to your senators and congressmen to just sit down, take the party labels out for a while, and just sit down and work out the right thing in the farm bill and the right thing in the appropriations, for all the appropriations, but especially for the one for the ag that's so important to y'all. So that is a quick summary of what we do in the appropriations. I can go on and on and on, but I see so many hands ready to go up to ask me a few questions. And I'll say like Henry Kissinger used to say, give me the question to the answer I'm about to give you.